What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 1 of 45 Minutes of Noise, a podcast of above average music discussion, squeezed into the average time it takes to listen to a full length album. I am your host, slash your boy, Kris Pugh, and I am joined by my very good friend and Mr. Snake on himself once again, Samuel Lewis, mate. It's great to be back in the saddle. How are we?
Well. It is really good to be back. Actually, it's been a while, and it feels like it's been another really interesting year in sort of alternative music, and it's really nice to dive back in and sort of wade through the waters with you again and just see what happens.
You may or may not recognise us. Myself and Sam, we were usually just hosts of the Noise podcast. We took some time away. We re-changed things a little around a little bit. We figured that the podcast that we used to host, the Noise podcast, though we loved that podcast, was a little longer than it needed to be in certain areas, and there was just a lot of times where me and Sam would review an album for an hour, and I'm not really sure who needed that. Most certainly not the listeners, I don't think. So 45 minutes of noise is essentially going to be us encapsulating everything that we used to do, but this time within a 45-minute time frame. Just because, for transparency, it's easier for me and Sam. It makes things less time constraining in terms of me and Sam are both teachers and very busy in our day to day. So it gives us more opportunity to get things done and not see the podcast as like this extra thing on our shoulders. But it also allows you as a listener, our idea is allows you as a listener to not have me and Sam have a 35-minute contextual fluff discussion on an album before actually talking about what it sounds like. So this is how the podcast is going to run from now. 45 minutes of noise. We're going to try and keep every single episode to within a 45-minute time frame, but still discussing the things that we would usually discuss, such as news, album reviews, and live reviews. And I am going to start doing as many interviews at Kris Meets as I can again. So that'll be starting up as well. So loads and loads coming up on the podcast network. And the best way that you can support us is by subscribing on YouTube, liking or following, depending on whichever service you use for podcasts. Leaving a 5-star rating would be amazing for me and Sam. Immediately gets us put into more different streams and allows more people to see us. And you can follow us on X at Noise Podcast. We're going to start with Deathwish, the Fourth Horseman. It's out on June 7th via Beer City Records. The Wisconsin four-piece, a kind of a blend of alternative rock and punk rock. Whenever we from the show going forward, me and Sam, when we do album reviews, I'm always going to try and pick one kind of new and upcoming band, as well as some staple bands that have released something or will be releasing something in the coming weeks. And for our first episode, I picked Deathwish, the Fourth Horseman. So I'm going to be honest. I selected this record purely based on its artwork. If you remember, Sam, do you remember me doing
I
this?
do, I
I
do.
kind of sat with you while I looked at the albums in our inbox, and I was like, "Oh, look at this one! This, the actual artwork artist, his name is Merikis, I believe. Shout out to Merikis wherever they are, because this album artwork is so cool. And I thought, you know what, we'll just do that one because that album artwork is absolutely sick. Seems like a trivial question and possibly even lame, I guess, to open up an album review conversation, Sam. But this record's just a good fun time, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely is. The cleanest and not and I don't think it's gonna come across as criticism because I really don't mean it as that. Because if you love the opening song, I have great news for you about the next 9.
Yeah, you can smell this album, can't you?
But it's like, oh well, if you really like In Cold Blood, have no fear because the next 8 songs are very similar to In
Yeah.
Cold Blood, and they have found a blueprint and they are plugging it away. And you're right, it's a good fun time. I was reading the liner notes beforehand, and I was actually reassured when they said themselves they're just like faster Motorhead, and they
Yeah,
absolutely are. And it was it
they
was
are
nice
fast
to
amounts
read
ahead.
like it was right, nice to read like liner notes to actually compare them bands appropriately rather than reading ones that are like this is like a cross between Radiohead and that 5 seconds of this Bruce Springsteen album combined with this Metallica, and it's like come on now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. But like this band seems to know who they are, and it's classic and it's fun and it's thrashy and it's up tempo and it's energetic and you're right, it's really enjoyable.
This is an album where I think us shortening down our album reviews actually is incredibly beneficial because I don't mean this as a criticism at all. This record knows who it's aiming for and spends 35 minutes doing nothing but metaphorically assaulting that crowd. Like it
Yes,
knows specifically, like specifically to a hairstyle, the person that it's looking for to listen to this album, and it directly chases them. In Cold Blood's got this really nice Slytherin riff that gives off this kind of hard rock, like dirty Van Halen vibe, blended with this thrashing sound that makes it a track fit for like the basement of your local. Kings of the Road's got this really nice bridging speed riff between chorus and second verse. Classic little solo riff as well. I basically spent this whole album listening to it, and again, I don't mean this as a criticism. I was thinking like this could soundtrack every motorbike scene in Sons of Anarchy. This album could, like, it would
Only
just
if it
fit in
starts at
perfectly.
87 miles an hour, Chris, and gets steadily faster from there. You're not pulling
Yeah,
out of a
possibly.
drive listening to this. You're already on the motorway.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
it's very much a full throttle 100% break 100 mile an hour breakneck speed album. But I just wanted to specifically mention Aftermath, which I think is the best track on the record. Got this thumping, looping rhythm riff, and it's overtaken by a slick pulsing lead line, really sneering vocals throughout. Gave it this kind of really heavy metal tonality, everything that a thrashing punk song should be. Any specifics that stood out for yourself?
Yeah, I like the opening track in Cobbler as well for exactly the same. Just fun rolling through. I actually thought that Kings of the Road, that opening was very sort of early Mastodon for
Yeah,
me.
nice.
Um I thought the I thought the opening on Aces and Eights was excellent. And I really enjoyed that the guitarist was like, I have a wah pedal and I am going to use this discriminately as often as possible and get off the wah pedal and play like sort of do no 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 and then just go back into it
Yeah.
again. Got a lot of time for that. The solo on Hell in My Head was terrific. The big chord opening there was fantastic. Um, I really enjoyed the bass opening and sort of like the midpoint sort of feeling of sort of Rainfire, and the opening of Aftermath of the mid tempo I thought was really, really excellent as well. It's heavy and it's fast paced and it's energetic and it's enjoyable, and it should be played exclusively in dingy thrash clubs up and down the country, which I assume is the clientele that they are hoping to reach, and I think they will do a perfectly reasonable job doing exactly that. Um this is a solid B plus thrash album, and the positive the positive is exactly the same as the criticism. It's a B plus thrash album, and if you're criticizing it, it's because it's a B plus thrash album, and that's just not your bag, and you hoped it
Yeah.
was something else, and it isn't, and that's not for you then, and that's okay. But if you listen
It
to the
doesn't
first
take
30
itself
seconds of In
overly
Cold Blood,
seriously.
no, of
Occasionally,
course
that
not.
might be to its detriment, but it has an onslaught of heaving rock and roll, which blended with this crash course of thrash and punk vocals. You can visualize the album, and it looks like a beer stain for four blokes in battle jackets and a room full of people banging their heads. I'm not really sure how you can complain, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. Well said.
So, Sam, if I look at our timer here at 32 minutes, we either need to have a very quick conversation about one of our next two albums or cut one entirely. What are your thoughts?
I think we could have a quick conversation about them, can't we? I think given that one of them we've heard half of for the last year and a half anyway. Let's be
Mm,
honest, right? It's essentially an extension of an already existing skeleton of the album. Like me and you heard 6 of these songs live in Download Festival last year, so let's not really call it a
yeah.
traditional review. And the Bad Omens record, spoiler alert, I don't know if you've probably read the title, is a remix album. There are 8 to 10 really new tracks and that type of stuff, but that is an OST as well. So I really think that actually we can do both, because it's not neither of these are what I would call traditional album reviews.
Let's see what we got then and see if we could do two album reviews in 12 minutes based on our previous history, Sam. That would be a laughable idea, but let's see what we got in our let's see what we got
Two
in the tank.
intros in 12
Let's
minutes might be a challenge last time.
yeah. Let's start with Bring Me the Horizon, Post-Human NeX GEn. That's actually already out now on Sony Music. It's the band's 8 length full album, and it's the follow up to 2020's Post-Human survival horror. I actually saw Ollie Sykes say exactly this in a Kerrang interview, but I feel like Bring Me are essentially in the quote "we can do what we want" stage of their career, and they've earned that. And I bring that up because the reality is that Bring Me the Horizon could release 3 or 4 experimental but also average albums and still sell out arenas across Europe. But though this album does experiment in in sometimes large moments, I actually feel like this album is a really, really high quality, great Bring Me the Horizon record for where they currently are. Some of the experimental moments on this album don't particularly work for me. For example, the trap beat of Pussy, I'm not quite sure what that does for the album. However, other side of that spectrum, Dig It is a stunning blend of synth pop and metalcore. There's this kind of fluctuating shift between Ollie singing and screaming, which at the same time the track kind of swirls around him. It's absolutely stunning. It's almost a shame that we'd already heard Kool-Aid, Strangers, Lost, Amen, Die For You, and Dark Side, because I feel like hearing two or three of those tracks for the first time within the confines of this album would have turned this album from this is a great Bring Me the Horizon record for where they currently are to a great Bring Me the Horizon record, full stop. Because I think when you add the likes of Top 10 Statues That Cry Blood and Bullet With My Name On and Utopia to the above list, I'm not sure how anyone could claim this is anything other than a wonderfully produced and performed album. They are the superstar band of this generation, with the exception of Avenged Sevenfold. And I just don't feel like Bring Me the Horizon ever miss, personally. I think there's just so much greatness to this album. And just to close off my thoughts before we move on to Bad Omens, Ollie Sykes' performance on this album vocally, I think we take him for granted. I think we forget that in 2008 he was doing Suicide Season, and we forget that's what he was, and that's how we boxed him in. I boxed him in that. This is what Ollie Sykes will always be able to do. He'll always just be a screamer, and as it turns out, Ollie Sykes has got a really, really phenomenal singing voice, and which was kind of teased to us a little bit on That's the Spirit, confirmed on Ammo, and by the time we've got here, it's like now it's unquestionable that I think Ollie Sykes is just a great vocalist, full stop. Sam, thoughts? NeX GEn?
Yeah, it's hard to yeah, you're right. It's hard to separate from the knowledge that this is really kind of like almost like a DLC, sort of like let's fill out the gaps between the structure of the singles, the skeleton, the stuff. Like you say, we've already heard Kool-Aid, we've already heard Dark Sides, we've already heard
Die
Lost,
For
we've
You
already
and
heard Amen,
yeah.
we've already heard Die For You, etc., etc., etc. Don't have to sort of nestle over that. But when you hear it in the context of the album, what I'm starting to notice here really is that the Bring Me the Horizon have now, rather than swaying from one genre shift to another, now they're kind of Jekyll and hiding genres together. And if you look at everything from the artwork, the multicolored things being stitched together, the black and white bear on the front, to the lowercase, uppercase style of writing, to the addition of features, the inclusion of lots of different artists, the band appear to be very, very interested in constructing new things from different stuff being sort of piled together. This feels very much like an album that's meant to be seen as a set of constituent genres being stitched together rather than like one holistic thing. Ollie just recently described it as a concept album, but I think the concept is multi-layered in even of itself. It's not really a singular idea for me, because I listen to this and it feels like they're like a sort of like glittering across and sort of fluttering around different kind of ideas and genres constantly. There's everything from synthwave to garage, traditional metalcore, deathcore, pop music, acoustic, all sort of layered in, even a little bit of like the acousticy indie bits at the starts of Dig It and what's the other tune? R.I.P. Those kind of songs are like completely different. There's like shades of Deftones here with some of the riffs on Utopia. A Teenage Wrist even sort of crossed my mind on a couple of these, as well as the baby metal synthwave metalcore element that they've started to incorporate. Bring Me the Horizon of chosen to be difficult to define, which makes them eminently unique. And this sound that they've produced is a confirmation of that, really. Like there's part to this that make me cringe a little bit. There's part to this that I don't think I'm supposed to be the target audience of, and that's okay. But overall, this is at its heart, really, it's a rock album with real pop weight that's been layered and adjusted and tweaked and vocoded and stitched together with other bits. And the titles have been changed and messed around and jumbled, and the artwork is sort of distorted. to give it this kind of rough sort of edge, to take away some of the polish and the sheen. But at its heart, this is a pretty standard, like, radio friendly rock record, that's wearing a metal jacket and covered in tattoos, I think. And that the thing is that Bring Me the Horizon are doing a better job of that than any band in the country, and maybe any other alternative band on the planet right now. They do a really, really good job of layering pop with enough riff and enough metal and enough scream, even tongue in cheek at some points. Like, oh, we know you want this bit, so we'll do it here. They've even said this in interviews. So they do a really good job of taking what they want to do, which is write big, selling, catchy, eminently memorable lyrics and songs, and then sharing it with just enough alternative ink for us to convince ourselves that they're still like a metal band. And we know, I don't think that they are. But what they are is a big band. And this is confirmed their sort of metamorphosis into sort of like this butterfly of different genres, and one of the more unique groups we've really had over the last 20 years. And this is just another confirmation of that. You're right. They're in the do what they want stage.
Let's close off the episode then with Bad Omens, Concrete Jungle, the OST, which is out now on Sumerian Records. As Sam previously alluded to, Concrete Jungle is essentially a selection of remixes and collaborations stemmed from the band's Superhuman breakout album, The Death of Peace of Mind. Out of interest earlier, I thought, I wonder how many that sold, Death of Peace of Mind. Even in the modern music industry, where album sales have dwindled more than we could possibly imagine, The Death of Peace of Mind sold 317,000 copies in America. I think that is absolutely unbelievable. 317,000 copies for a metalcore band in 2022 in North America. Unbelievable. Like, if you were curious about how big are Bad Omens, that's how big Bad Omens are. Even in 2022, we're selling 317,000 copies of an album. Absolutely incredible. And I think it's interesting to look at Bad Omens through the before and after effect of Ammo lens from Bring Me the Horizon. Because I'm not, no one will know this answer, but do Bad Omens become as experimental as they have without Ammo being released by Bring Me? Probably not. And I do kind of see Bring Me the Horizon as the quote unquote fathers of Bad Omen. And we're looking at a band here that, along with Sleep Token, are going to spearhead modern rock and metal through the rest of the 20s. I think that for Bad Omens to already be in a position where they feel bold and comfortable enough to release an experimental record such as this kind of speaks volumes as to how talented that they are. I think that Bad Omens are the kind of band you would look at and you would do they're manufactured for success. And when I say that, I don't mean that they're manufactured for success in the same way that Imagine Dragons were manufactured for success. I mean, they've got everything in their favour. That because Bad Omens are the real deal, man. Like, I've not seen them live, but I've watched a lot of live videos. They are the real deal. Noah Sebastian is this great looking, enigmatic, talented front man that really, really leads that band brilliantly. He's got a stunning voice live, and they're also great musicians. So they're manufactured for success in the sense of the artwork and the aesthetic that they give off, and kind of the way they are promoted on social media and by large alternative music publications. They're all behind them and everyone's moving them forward. But I meant that as a compliment. Like, they are also the real deal. Sam, are you on board? Because that's pretty much the purpose of me putting this album towards you. I gave this album for us to review because they're going to release another album at some point in the next 12 months, I believe, which is going to be like the actual next album. You on board?
What does on board mean?
In the sense for Bad Omens, an artist that I genuinely don't think you would go out of your way to listen to. Do you understand why they're huge?
Yeah, of course. I understand why they're big. You can see the appeal, and it does follow the same kind of sort of Bring Me the Horizon pathway in a sense, where it's an amalgamation of genres, and it's a collection of synthetic electronic stuff with touches of metal, and that appears to be where the genre is making the most strides in terms of its success. If you put Bad Omens alongside Sleep Token and Bring Me the Horizon, there's a lot of sort of threads of similarity there, and really that the bands that are seemingly really successful seem to combine this soft melodic tone from the vocalist juxtaposed with the sort of heavy and occasionally industrial sounds behind it. And this is this is a confirmation of that. And I agree, bands are becoming more experimental, and they're becoming encouraged to be that by record labels and fan bases and the internet and all the rest of it. And that is allowing bands to take their own approaches to music. And that means that we're getting lots of really interesting discussions of what a band is, because there is no longer a linear approach to success anymore. There is no longer a, one album tour, 2 album tour, 3 album American tour kind of like structure that sort of worked in the last sort of 34 years. That has completely gone out the window. And I agree that the fact that the band have decided to do this at their second record shows a level of sort of ambition and comfort within themselves that probably indicates they feel pretty good about the direction that they're going to go in the next record, where this can kind of just be seen as just like an amended section or an addendum to the actual almost mainline Bad Omens records. You can sort of see where they're fairly comfortable with what they expect it to become, where this can just become a thing that they do as well as, rather than anything they need to particularly rely on, because this just feels like an interesting project for the band to do while they're putting things together and collecting ideas ahead of a real record next year. And it shows that intricacy, songwriting, and confidence, really, and that can only come from a band that seems to believe that they're going to be very successful in the future. So yeah, I could definitely see them being a massive band over the next 3 or 4 years, definitely.
So just we have slightly overrun, which who would bet on that for the first episode, but just some specifics from me. I feel like, it's really amazing that Bad Omens, as young as they are, they're already such a large band that even though this is quote unquote their third album, they're still been like, oh, you know what we could do? We could highlight these up and coming artists in these moments. Like, for example, The Drain is pretty much a Health and Swarm track. But Noah Sebastian just comes in to deliver these really beautiful slithering vocals that gives it that Bad Omens feel. The riffs on Van with Poppy are really, really cool. Again, Poppy's this kind of a dark pop artist, and to see her on this album and to see her on do a song with Not Loose as well, I thought was particularly interesting. I thought it was really cool to put a huge spotlight on Bob Vylan, who does that great little hip hop diatribe on terms and conditions. The only song that I really thought was like a huge misstep really was Hedonist, and that's primarily because I don't really see a lot of quality in Wargasm. They don't really do anything for me, and I'm not really sure what this song brings. Oh, that's interesting. I'm not really sure what that song does, with the exception of like a nice climactic breakdown. Something I have to mention is Anything More Than Human. For me, that's by far the standout moment of the album.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And again, indicative of the position Bad Omens are in, where they can spotlight a band like Error and give them the fuel to take this track into something special. Because Bad Omens bring the dark rock vibe with a really nice sang chorus, and Error just turn it into this metalcore banger. Like the final 2 minutes of that song go so hard. It's absolutely phenomenal. And Bad Omens, I think that whether you're massively into them or you're ambivalent towards them or you dislike them, I think they are like an exciting proposition. That we're in this position where on album 3, quote unquote, they're already doing an experimental album before they do the real next step. And considering what their previous record did for them, I think we are looking at like the next real big deal. The kind of the understudy of Bring Me the Horizon, I feel Bad Omens are. So Concrete Jungle, the OST, isn't, I'm not sure whether you'd call it a new album or not, but at the very least, it kind of extends my interest in the band. Shines a light on some new, less well-known artists, especially in the sake of Error and Bob Vylan, and delivers moments where Noah Sebastian reminds you just how good a vocalist he is. I think we've got something really special coming up in Bad Omens.
Yeah, I've got to echo those thoughts. I think they're an exciting band. And I think there's a lot of, and I think I agree with Anything Human being the actual highlight of the record. And that was the moment where you think, okay, if they can produce an album that has another 10 to 12 songs like this, or in this world, or at least has 6 to 7 of them, they're going to be really, really big. Let's be honest. This appears to be the cocktail of what makes successful music in 23-24 in the alternative landscape. And they are seemingly experts in that field at this moment.
That's where we're going to leave off episode 1 of 45 Minutes of Noise. We are going to be back in 2 weeks' time. Going to look at the music schedules, going to look at the album release schedules and see what is worth discussing. At the very least, we will have discussion on Wage War and Story So Far's new records because they come out in the next month or so. So I want to thank you so much for your support on episode 1. If you do want to carry on supporting us, Phil, please subscribe to the Noise Podcast Network's YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter at Noise Podcast, sorry, on X, sorry, at Noise Podcast. And you can like/subscribe/follow, depending on whichever service you use to listen to podcasts. I want to thank you again for spending your time with us. We are going to see you in 2 weeks. Thank you very much. We love you. Bye.